Hello and welcome back. Today I want to speak to the ego. I don't want to speak to the ego, I want to speak about the ego. What I understand is the ego. I truly believe that, if you've seen any of my videos, I'm sure you've heard this come out of my mouth before, but I truly believe that the more that I dive into my consciousness, I find that words lack sufficient descriptive capacity. And I have realized that a lot of words are actually tainted by the vocabulary of the user and the receiver. This is where a lot of misunderstanding comes. I believe that the language that we use is tainted by our experience and therefore is filtered by the ego in very different ways. So I want to explain what I refer to as the ego, or what I understand is the ego. For me, the ego is basically just a filter. So the way that I understand and describe our dimensionality is that our third dimension is our physical body. Obviously, we know this. And I think that that is where emotions are processed. Then we have the fourth dimension, which for me is the mind, the rational mind. Now, that is where the ego lives. The ego uses our logics and our rationality to keep us safe based on what it is triggered by, based on what we have experienced throughout our lifetimes. I say lifetimes in plural because I don't mean just the incarnation that you are currently embodying. I mean also past lives. I also refer to karmic, through the lineage, karmic lessons, or limiting beliefs more, because it's stored in, it's the ego. So how does this happen? The generational part, especially, I think is something that we need to get our minds around. The ego likes to rationalize things. So the way that I understand that this is done through lineage, the inheriting, is that because souls, we come here to experience energy, to navigate energy, which is basically what we know as karma, right? So I believe that our ego is also formed and inherited through the lineage. So say I have children, and if there is something that my ego hasn't been able to neutralize and turn into dharma, a lesson learned, then my child will inherit that karma through their ego, through their filter. In the end, I am the one that is raising them. It's like they say, Yeshua was made in image of God, right? So our children are made in our own image. And so this is how I believe that we actually inherit this ego. So I want to keep myself really on track today, because I know that I speak to a lot of different things just because I see the interconnectedness of everything. One of my soul specializations is this ability to see the interconnectedness of everything and just kind of link lots of things. And so I've been rewatching my videos and realizing that I talk to a lot of different things that I understand, because that's how my brain works. However, I need to keep things simple and separate and make sure that I'm explaining myself clearly. So I really want to just stick to the ego here. That was just a bit of a tangent that I went on. So yes, our ego is what is navigating the karma, and the ego is experienced through our triggers. So our ego, and this is something that I've been navigating for a little while now, realizing that we have come to, in a certain way, demonize the ego. There's a lot of speak to ego death, which kind of suggests that we can kill the ego. I don't believe that we can kill the ego. I don't think that we actually want to kill the ego, because in the end, the ego is survival programming. And what would we do without our survival instinct? Would we be walking out onto the street as a bus is passing? So I don't think that ego is necessarily something that needs to be killed. I think it needs to be subjugated. Subjugation is a big word for control. I believe that as humans, it's an ego thing to think that we can control something. And yet, it is the human word that I find is best aligned to express that ideally what we want to be working towards is observing the ego and not letting it take over and lead our lives. So subjugating the ego for me means observing it, asking it, why am I operating this way? What do you need to feel safe? The ego needs to feel safe and secure. It's just like a child. A child needs to feel safe and secure so that it can find the courage within to take leaps of faith. And so this is why I don't believe that the ego needs to be killed off or squandered. I think that the ego needs to be embraced. We need to thank it for wanting to protect us. But we need to, or we could, demonstrate to our ego that a lot of our programming doesn't serve us. So identifying, for example, that little voice in your head that is telling you, oh no, we can't do that. We shouldn't do that. Asking yourself, where is that coming from? I believe that anything that is loving, that is uplifting, that is encouraging as a thought, I believe that comes from the divine. I believe that that is what is tapping into the unity consciousness, because our unity consciousness understands that we are powerful and limitless. And yet anything that would come from duality, separation, comparison, a lack of self-belief or self-worth is the ego. The ego would prefer not necessarily to keep you small, because honestly, it's the ego that likes to think that we have a purpose or a mission. These words make us feel important. And yet we don't need words to make us feel important. We are all important. Again, we are all limitless and powerful. So I believe that it's the ego that likes to think that we have a purpose or a mission, and it likes us to be big. And yet, like I was saying, it doesn't necessarily want to keep us small. What it wants to do is keep us safe. Safe in terms of the ego, for example, if you're like me and you're somebody who knows that they are here to spread word, to communicate things, to show themselves publicly. My ego for a long time was telling me, who are you to speak out loud about this? What do you know? You haven't studied all of this and all of that. And the truth is, well, that's probably another topic. I believe that we are channeling the universal wisdom. I believe that that's what this era is about. It's about channeling the universal wisdom and coming back into that gnosis, rather than simply perpetuating and regurgitating old indoctrinations or the old ways that actually got us to where we are right now in duality and separation. So yes, my ego was telling me things like, who are you to teach about this? Who are you to speak about this? Because all you do is channel, and is your channel really channel? And so this was my ego's way of keeping myself safe, because as long as I'm not speaking up, as long as I'm not showing myself, I will not be persecuted, prosecuted, ridiculed, rejected. This is basically what the ego wants, especially because of past life karmic stuff, where I had a very big witch wound before I tapped into all of my gifts. And as I was tapping into my gifts, it became even bigger. I believe that the more conscious that we become, the more that the ego steps in, and we need to start to subjugate it, because we are releasing all of this karma, and all of a sudden the ego goes, wait a second, wait a second, wait a second, wait a second. And so it starts to fluctuate in a bigger scale, we start to find a lot more of the karma flushing up, and the ego is just like, wait a second, I can't take it all at once. So I had the witch wound, I had sisterhood wound. There's a lot in my lineage also about feminine empowerment. So subjugating the ego has a lot to do with recognizing your core karmic wounds and the symptomatic karmic lessons that come with, and identifying how they actually relate to you and your experience, and how you can use that knowledge to rewire your ego, to reprogram your subconscious. So yeah, I think that's a good first speech about the ego. I think if anything wants to come to me to kind of close this video, it would be going back to what I was saying about the ego really liking to think that we have a purpose, we have a mission, we have a certain something, and needing to feel special in that kind of way, in experiencing duality or separation, creating a hierarchy instead of understanding that our greatness is part of our collective empowerment. So I think, to wrap it up, what I'm trying to say is that it's the ego that is keeping us in duality and separation. It is keeping us from truly experiencing that oneness, that unity consciousness. When you allow your ego to fully drop away, I believe that that is when you have these moments of satori, enlightenment, where you get to experience the gnosis that you are a powerful creator, because we are not only children of the divine, we are divine. I believe that we use the carpet or blanket statement, children of the divine, because we like to think that, or we do, we know we come from, but there is an aspect to continuing to put that power outside of us instead of realizing that we are that power. I've been having lots of conversations lately where I am literally picking up a pencil and saying to people, this is made up of the same as you and me. This is literally atoms. It's energy. We are also made up of atoms and energy. Our physical vessel, right? And so we are no different to this pencil, which came from a tree, which is also a living being, which had its own atoms, which had its own part of the mycelium. We are literally all one. You are your puppy or your cat. You are your parents. You are your neighbor. You are God. You are Goddess. You are Source. This is something that I think that we are navigating now as a collective. If we truly want unity consciousness, it's not just about thinking that all of the people on the planet are one. It's about realizing that we are one with the stars, with the cosmos. We are one with Divine Source. So I think that's a pretty good place to wrap up this video. And just in case I wasn't making that last thought clear, it's the ego that separates us from everything else. And so it creates duality and separation. And so it prevents us from experiencing unity consciousness. So it is in subduing or subjugating the ego that we can truly recognize our power, our limitlessness, and the reason why we're here. It's to navigate karma. It's to turn it into dharma. It's to uplift. It's to be part of an amazing collective. And I know that right now things look like they are hitting the fan big time. But I believe that this is because we are moving into an era of change, an era of not just going backwards into what the ancients knew about our power, our inheritance, our divinity, our nature, true nature as creative beings, as divine creative beings. We're moving it into the future. We're taking the ancient knowledge and we are also redefining it, because obviously the collective isn't where it was umpteen thousand years ago. There had to be progress. So yeah, thank you for joining me today. I realize I went off on another tangent. That's just the way that my brain works. Again, so much interconnectedness that I see. If you have any questions that you would like me to answer, please do leave them below. If you want to get in contact with me, I also leave all my details below. So just like, subscribe if you resonate with my content. I would appreciate that very, very much. And I send love to everybody as always. Thank you again.